Scarlet Spider might be the biggest disappointment of any release in recent memory in Marvel Snap. Now, I want to be clear what I mean by disappointment. It's hard to disappoint if you aren't expected to be very good. Disappointment is a measure of performance relative to expectations. I had very high expectations for Scarlet Spider, and they were not met. All of my fears about the metagame being hostile to this card ended up being true. I found one deck in which I was able to gain a fair amount of ranks that included Scarlet Spider, but he was not an incredibly important part of it, just a very solid role player in it. Any deck in which he is an incredibly important part has a very hostile metagame to deal with. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about the deck that I used with Scarlet Spider that I actually did have a very good win rate, a very good cube gain rate with. Let's get into it. So, why is Scarlet Spider a disappointment? Bluntly, it's not really about him. It's about everything else that this metagame is doing. And that makes it very difficult for me to look at this card and say he's actively bad, so much as it's easy for me to say he is disappointing relative to expectations. Why? Culprit number one, Hela. Scarlet Spider wants to be a card in a deck that is able to output stats and then interact with its opponent to drag them down to its level. That's what this card wants to be doing. It wants to be carrying some buffs, and then your final turn is some interaction with your opponent, and you got a lot out of your cheap and very large Scarlet Spider. Maybe he's a 414, things like that. That's what you want to be doing. You want to be in a world where playing a 414 matters. We're not in that world because of Hela. You're simply not going to outpoint that deck in a meaningful way. Culprit number two is bounce. Same exact issue. You are not going to outpoint these decks in meaningful ways. They are going to be able to throw priority and play a million dudes. You are not going to be able to handle their point output. So that is issue number one for Scarlet Spider, is he is not as good at outputting points as the top tier point output decks right now. And you don't have meaningful interactive tools for those decks because of the nature of those decks. Culprit number two, Clog. Clog is a deck that relies on filling up your opponent's board. Scarlet Spider is a card that fills up your board. He is actively helping your opponent clog you in many situations. This is not how it always was, but Clog has received a variety of cheap cloggers that have enabled it to, on turn 4 or 5, almost guarantee that they are going to clog up a lane if they have access to any reasonable part of their deck and if you have 2 cards in any lane. These combinations of cloggers include Titania, Acid Arrow, Viper, White Widow, and, of course, Green Goblin. Any combination of those cards, basically, will enable them to send over 2 units on turn 4 or 5, depending on the cost of those cards, and that is the scariest thing in the entire world for someone who is trying to rely on this. Scarlet Spider is not good at handling that. 410 is great value, but 410 over 2 board spaces in a metagame where board spaces can be at a premium, not as good. Culprit number 3 is move, although it's a little bit less of an issue. The major thing that you're going to run into playing Scarlet Spider decks against move decks is that they have a lot of points and also have some meaningful interactive tools. By that I mean, these are decks that are playing Cosmo and Alioth, so let's say you're playing a Scarlet Spider deck with Namora, let's say you're playing a Scarlet Spider deck with all of these, you know, the Wong stuff. You're doing like Wong Scarlet Spider, you kind of eat it to Cosmo, you kind of eat it to Alioth. If you're trying Namora Scar, you kind of end up running out of the ability to have enough points. I've seen people trying to do that. Their point output is simply not equal to a good move draw because of the way move has had to adapt. So what the hell was I actually playing him in then? It was this. This is Fruit Punch, the Juice Box, whatever you want to call it. It is a fairly reasonably known deck at this point. It is a deck that looks to combine the Storm War Machine Legion plan with the powerful Madam Web stats plan. This is a deck that leverages a lot of different game plans at different times. Previously, there was basically a free spot in the deck that was Jeff the Baby Landshark. I am actually convinced that Scarlet Spider is a better option over Jeff. It does make more sense in that slot than Jeff does, but I'm not convinced that it's a marriage made in heaven. This is just a card that is filling a role that there aren't very many good things to fill in for. It's there so you can do some stuff when your deck isn't drawing perfectly, so you're able to add 5 power back onto storm lanes in the games where that matters, but it is not part of your plan A, and it is not part of your plan B, which in some order are big move stuff and cheat with War Machine. Now, it can be helpful in the games where your deck is drawing, half of one and then half of the other. You can have these games where you're able to set up situations that you can really win one lane big time, and then you actually just need to win your storm lane with points. This card is actually useful in that role. I've even done things like use Aranya to make it a 4/7, copy the clone over, then move the clone out of a Madam Web lane. Stuff like that is cool. But this is not a deck that is a Scarlet Spider deck, and that's really why I consider this card a disappointment. I have not played any deck that is a Scarlet Spider deck in a real way. None of them have felt remotely reasonable. I've tried it in multiple places. This is the best one, and it is definitively not a Scarlet Spider deck. Scarlet Spider is trying to do a thing that is not wanted in this metagame right now. Many people have been comparing him to Big Mr. Sinister. That's not really how I would go about it. I don't really think that I would be talking about it in the context of Big Mr. Sinister, because he does have the utility of splitting across multiple locations, which is actually the most valuable part of the card. With all of that said, I do think this deck is actually just really, really good. Scarlet Spider or no. So we're gonna launch into a card-by-card breakdown and then some gameplay. Aranya is pretty much a beast, but she is by far inferior to a card like Madam Web. Madam Web is the engine that makes this deck go. Aranya is a nice piece of tech for you to have. One of the things that I struggle with Aranya is setting her up in such a way that all of the different things this deck can ask her to do are relevant and are necessary and are helping you. For example, let's say you storm the middle lane. Where do you want your Aranya? Do you want that in the middle lane? Do you want to leave only one spot in the middle lane? What happens if your opponent clogs the middle lane and you put that Aranya in the middle lane and now you can't move something over to that lane? There's a lot of weird positioning stuff that does end up costing you in certain contexts that's worth keeping in mind. This is a fire and forget, but do be careful about what you do with this card. Another very replaceable card in the shell is Nebula. She's mostly just there so you can have something that makes sense in a world where you need to just win your storm lane. There are games where your goal is win the storm lane, skip turn 5, play the Infinite. There are other games where your goal is win the storm lane, play War Machine, play the Infinite. Either way, that is a thing that you're going to be doing a decent amount of the time, and Nebula does help you do that. Great card on storm lanes as long as your opponent is not playing War Machine. Great card in general for those games where you have to play half of a lockdown deck. Ghost Spider moves cards. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that is her major utility. A lot of the bad draws in a deck like this involve Aranya, Ghost Spider, Iron Fist, nothing to move, and that stuff really does suck. But some of the time you are going to be able to do these final turn jukes with Ghost Spider that are worth keeping in mind. Yanking a Legion off of the lane that it's on to go to a different lane, stuff like that. Not always going to matter, but it can matter. Generally, I look to save this card, whereas with Iron Fist, I look to play it out as much as I can. The more clogged the board gets, the harder this card is to use, and so mostly to save myself the mental energy, if I have a choice between using Iron Fist and Ghost Spider early, I'm usually going to choose the Iron Fist. There are, of course, exceptions, right? Iron Fist is better in a world where you have stormed a lane that you can then Iron Fist stuff onto and you don't have War Machine. That's the kind of thing that can happen. It's not overwhelmingly possible, but it does break that heuristic, so we do need to mention it. Obviously, there are situations where Iron Fist is more useful. Almost all of those situations involve you having a storm, you playing it on the left or the middle, and you not having a War Machine. Dagger gets moved and gets big. That is her thing. She is absolutely enormous with just one move late in the game. With two moves late in the game, she will dominate basically anything. I have had games where my final turn Iron Fist, Dagger, Ghost Spider beat out a full-powered Brood Silver Surfer lane, just absolutely demolished it. She was just bigger than their whole thing. She's very, very strong, very, very big, and very, very much worth respecting. I feel like Madam Web is probably the best card in this deck, because not only does she work with your move cards, obviously, right? She also gives you this flexibility and leeway to set up lanes in a way that is useful to you. She adds cards to storm lanes when you don't have War Machine. She makes things easy. And I think that's the real superpower this card has, is Madam Web is just providing you an absolute ass ton of player agency when you play this card, and the better you are, the better she is. The more you are able to analyze the situation. What am I doing? What is my opponent doing? How do I win this game? What are the things they're going to do? The more able she is able to bring you to that outcome. You envision a final board state, and she can make it happen. The Storm War Machine Legion combo is pretty much the most broken thing this deck does, but if we're being super honest, it, does not happen a lot. This is, a thing that happens, theoretically, 1 in 10 games. I think I did it, 3 times out of 30, so I guess that's 1 in 10. Actually, now that I think about it, I played, 38 games, but whatever. This is a combo that you cannot realistically rely on. It is not your plan A. It just happens sometimes. Usually you're using disparate pieces of it and then disparate pieces of your move stuff in order to make it happen. But Storm is still a great card for you because you have this Madam Web stuff, this ability to Iron Fist stuff in there, this ability to go back and win it later with a War Machine, and because of the Infinaut. A lot of what this deck does, if it's not doing either of the game plans perfectly, is just win a Storm lane, play the Infinaut, probably gonna win. The value propositions on Vulture and Dagger look similar, but they are a little bit different. Vulture scales harder. Dagger scales harder. Vulture has a little bit of a higher base or one move potential. Get a couple moves out of this, you're really happy. You get 2 moves out of a Dagger into a full lane, that's usually better, but a lot of the time you're going to want to split this up, or some of the time you're going to want to split this up. This deck is very heavy on context. You don't always want to super invest in the big Dagger. Sometimes it's better to play a Vulture that moves once and a Dagger that moves once, because sometimes you need, Ghost Spider the Vulture somewhere, Iron Fist the Dagger somewhere. You need that 11 points from the Ghost Spider Vulture. You need that 14 points from the Iron Fist Dagger. That's the kind of thing that can really matter. So Ben Reilly in this deck replaced Jeff, and I am fairly convinced that he's an upgrade, but not an upgrade that is worth spending your tokens on at the moment, at least. The metagame is just a little bit too hostile to what he delivers. What this slot actually really wants to be is 3/5 Nocturne or something like that. But we don't have access to that card anymore, and Ben does a pretty good impression of getting power into other locations that may be closed off, right? He is able to, oh, I have a 4/5 guy here, all right, I'm going to activate him, and then, because I got a Madam Web there, I can move him around too. There's some interesting power redistribution stuff he can do, but being completely honest, he sits in the hand a decent amount of the time, the same way Jeff did. This is not a card that is 100% part of your game plan. Your better game plans involve playing your other 4-drop almost all of the time. War Machine, honestly, just great. Just a really good card right now, a really good card in this deck. Frees up a lot of the awful things that can get you in trouble in a move shell. One technological note here, if you are counting on a War Machine to allow you to play cards and move stuff into a Space Throne, you will actually not be able to do that. War Machine is not going to be able to let you move stuff into Space Throne, but he will let you play cards there. Big difference, worth pointing out. I had to learn that on the fly. You get to learn it from this video. The other major thing War Machine does is let you just play the Infinite. And I know I've talked about how a lot of this deck is just win Storm Lane, play Infinite. The best draws in this deck do seem to look like that, where it's like your turn 4 is a War Machine, your turn 5 is like moving some crap around and just making a bunch of points, and then just playing the Infinite on the final turn. And suddenly they're like facing down like a 12 dagger, like a 9 vulture, and then just a 20 power dude. Now, Legion is mostly here so you can do the Storm War Machine Legion scam. No real qualms about that one. Do what you gotta do. That is almost your only win condition, or at least your most reliable win condition against the deck like Hela. You can try to like roll the dice and go for the gambas on those. It's not necessarily something I'd advise doing, but I think it does work out more often than you'd think. But that's not necessarily to say you should always do it. You gotta have a very concrete understanding of why that would happen. In the absence of this combo, you do end up a bit of a dog to Hela. Again, you can try for the points, but I'm not really sure it works. When you have the combo, you cannot lose. And of course, the main thing that Legion does outside of the combo is just location scam. Dark Dimension, or Death's Domain, the other DD one. Death's Domain, you can scam people on that. The Nexus, you can rug pull on that. Bar with No Name, you can rug pull on that. Everyone knows what Legion is able to do. Between Storm and Legion, you have a ton of location control. So when locations really matter, when you think of a game and you're like, that was a Limbo game, that was a Nexus game, any location you can think of in those terms, Legion is going to be able to do something cool about it. I don't know if y'all know this, but 620 is like really, really big. And like, the ability that War Machine just says you can play this card is really strong when combined with the unpredictability of the move package. Because they have to be accounting for so many different things. Like, let's say you have a dagger or a vulture on a Madam Web and the ability to play this card. You can put 12 to 20 power anywhere you want. Just anywhere you want. You can be like, oh, the dagger's going over here, and then this is going to go in the lane the dagger was in. God forbid the dagger has some power, too, because then we're talking about, like, multiple 20 power things that are moving around, right? Like, that's horrifying. They just don't know where your point output is going to be. And that is, I think, a major strength of this deck, is that it is able to have these wildly confusing turn 6s, wildly large point output with a lot of confusion in it, and it's not actually doing a ton to get there. Like, it's still a deck that can just get free wins out of the combo. It's still a deck that just has a bunch of points out of the move stuff. It's not sacrificing so much to be able to play this card. Now, you know, sometimes it's going to suck, right? Like, sometimes it's not good. Sometimes you are going to not draw War Machine, and you're just going to have to be like, all right, I'm going all in on this location. I am going all in on winning this Stormland. I'm going to win this Stormland, and then I'm going to play the Infinite. That wins a surprising amount of the time, too. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for making it through that video. We're going to jump into the gameplay from here. Normally, I do a thing where I talk about whether or not you should open for this card or buy this card. I think at this point, you know, right now, this card is not worth opening for. At some point in the future, when the metagame isn't this, we'll have to revisit him. I do not know. I don't think I've ever seen a card that I actually genuinely do think has potential be as bad as this, where it's like, this card is good. It can be good, but it released at the absolute worst time for anyone wanting to do anything with it. And that's tough. As always, I've been KM Best, and you have been phenomenal. We don't love... I'll stay. I don't give a fuck. I'm a moron. Makes sense. Oh, Madam Web. Hey, me too. You have one card in. And it is a Shadow King. Sure, YOLO, what the fuck ever. Let's die. Let's die, baby. Let's win, baby! Oh my god. Let's win, baby. Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go! Some cool dagger shit, I think. Okay. Is there a snapshot this week? No, we are on hiatus. Worth a shot, right? Coolio. Worth a shot indeed. Complaint incoming? Oh, I'm always complaining. That's my secret. Always be complaining. Oh, God. Oh, God. So do I pass here? Let's fucking go, dude. No fucking Monster Metropolis for you. Oh my god. The Legion either way. Interestingly enough, if we just played the Infinite, we won it that way. Sure, it would work. Bug? I don't think it's a bug. I thought I did it, but I'm sure I just messed up or something. I hate doing this, but I will. Bip bip, right? Am I getting fucking a nihilist here? Fascinating. So I have 21 and 18. It said activated and deactivated. It actually did bug. That's crazy. I think I'm losing 4 here, but I want to stay. Yes. Yes. Let's go. New glasses, actually old glasses. I found. Gee, I wonder if they're clog. I wonder if they're clog. Why don't I get any turn 1 snaps? I guess the better question is, why do I stay on the turn 1 snaps? I just figure if they think that they're doing something good here, I don't want them to have that. Do we need to win the 50-50, or can we play the Aranya for a total of 10 additional there? Do we have to try to win the 50-50? So they move this over here. It's 3. It's 11. MODOK goes there. They discard 2 cards. So 13. I think we have to try to win the 50-50. All right. Thank God. Thank God. I guess we didn't even have to win the 50-50 because they didn't. This hand is bad. Rovona. They snapped me. I can't say I feel amazing about it. I think my best draw would be like Dagger. Makes sense. Okay. Do I win now? Oh my god, thank you fucking god. Jesus Christ. Fucking mind. Dead. Dead. Dead, but also ow. And dead. Holy shit! I was very happy with that. Turn 7, huh? Well, we do get to just play the Infinite on 6, almost certainly. Unless we have a Legion here. Ow. Hmm. I feel like I'm about to get robbed. I feel like I'm in the process of being robberied. I'm going to fall victim to a heinous crime, I think. I think I'm about to get criminal all over. Ghost Spider, the dagger. Okay, well, what do you know? Okay, so the Infinite What if the Infinite doesn't move? Dagger always ends up in the middle. Fuck. It's... I don't think I can do it. Because it's like... I can give 7? Like, here's what I can do. I can do... Activate Aranya. Scarlet Spider. I don't know. Yes! Oh, God Gaming, let's fucking go! Let's fucking go! I ape-moded the entire way through that. Just actual moron shit from you boy.